The Colorado Rockies rise from the Great Plains like the spine of a sleeping giant, their snow-capped peaks piercing a sky so blue it seems painted by divine hands. These mountains, carved by ice and time into cathedrals of stone and snow, have drawn adventurers and dreamers for centuries, from the Ute and Arapaho who knew every secret path and sacred place, to the gold seekers who scarred their slopes with pick and shovel, to the modern outdoor enthusiasts who come seeking solitude and challenge in some of America's most spectacular wilderness. But even the Rockies, with all their majesty and mystery, their documented history of avalanches and altitude sickness, hypothermia and human error, had never witnessed anything quite like what happened on the crisp October morning of 2015, when Dr. Sarah Elizabeth Mackenzie vanished without a trace while attempting a solo hike on the Continental Divide Trail near Rocky Mountain National Park. 9 years later, the discovery of her iPhone buried in a snowbank at 12,000 feet would unravel a mystery so profound that it would challenge everything we thought we knew about the nature of time, consciousness, and the hidden dimensions that might exist parallel to our own reality. Dr. Sarah Mackenzie was the embodiment of everything that drew people to Colorado's outdoor culture, a brilliant 34-year-old physicist from Boulder, whose passion for mountaineering was matched only by her groundbreaking research into quantum mechanics and temporal theory at the University of Colorado. Standing 5'6" with the lean, weathered build of someone who spent every free weekend above treeline, Sarah had grown up in Fort Collins as the daughter of a National Park Service ranger and a high school chemistry teacher. The mountains weren't just her playground, they were her laboratory, her church, and her home in the deepest sense of the word. Sarah's expertise in both theoretical physics and high-altitude mountaineering made her a unique figure in Colorado's outdoor community. She held doctorates in both quantum physics and atmospheric science, and her research focused on what she called environmental quantum fields, the theory that certain geographic locations, particularly those with unique electromagnetic properties, might experience fluctuations in the fundamental nature of spacetime. Her academic work had taken her to mountain ranges around the world, from the Himalayas to the Andes, studying how extreme altitude and specific geological formations might influence quantum phenomena. But it was the Colorado Rockies that truly captured Sarah's imagination and scientific curiosity. She had spent over 15 years documenting what she believed were temporal anomalies in specific locations throughout the range, places where her sensitive scientific instruments detected unusual electromagnetic readings, where wildlife behavior patterns seemed to shift inexplicably, and where even experienced outdoors people reported strange phenomena. Sarah's hiking logs, meticulously maintained since graduate school, contained detailed observations of these anomalies, complete with GPS coordinates, atmospheric readings, and photographic documentation of unusual cloud formations and light phenomena. Those who knew Sarah described her as a woman who lived fully in both the rational world of science and the mystical realm of the mountains. She could spend days deriving equations that described the mathematical properties of dimensional boundaries, then transition seamlessly to planning solo expeditions into some of Colorado's most remote and challenging terrain. Her Boulder apartment was a fascinating blend of cutting-edge laboratory equipment and mountaineering gear, with walls covered in topographic maps marked with cryptic notations and shelves lined with both physics journals and climbing guidebooks. Sarah's research had attracted attention from unexpected quarters. In addition to her academic colleagues, she had developed relationships with members of the Ute Nation who shared oral traditions about thin places in the mountains, where their ancestors had reported visions and spiritual experiences. Elder Joseph Running Bear of the Southern Ute tribe had become both a friend and an informal research partner, sharing traditional knowledge about locations that his people had considered sacred or dangerous for generations. The old ones knew about the places where time bends, Joseph had told Sarah during one of their many conversations about mountain mysteries. They knew that some peaks and valleys exist in more than one world at the same time. They left warnings about these places, told us to approach them with respect and proper preparation, but they also knew that sometimes these places call to certain people who are meant to cross over and bring back knowledge. In the months leading up to her disappearance, Sarah had become increasingly focused on a specific area of the Continental Divide that she believed represented the most significant temporal anomaly she had ever encountered. Her instruments had detected electromagnetic readings in this region that defied conventional explanation, and she had documented several instances of what she called time slips, brief periods when her GPS devices would malfunction, Her watches would run backward, and she would experience moments of disorientation that suggested she was experiencing multiple time streams simultaneously. Sarah's research notes from this period, later found in her Boulder apartment, revealed that she had been planning what she called a convergence expedition, a solo hiking trip timed to coincide with a rare alignment of electromagnetic and atmospheric conditions that she predicted would occur in mid-October 2015. According to her calculations, this alignment happened only once every 37 years and created optimal conditions for what she termed dimensional permeability in the specific area where she planned to conduct her research. The expedition that would be Sarah's last began on October 15, 2015, when she set out from the Bear Lake Trailhead in Rocky Mountain National Park with plans to spend 5 days conducting research along a remote section of the Continental Divide. Sarah was equipped with state-of-the-art mountaineering gear, advanced scientific instruments for measuring electromagnetic phenomena, and enough food and emergency supplies for a week-long expedition. She had filed detailed trip plans with the Park Service and had arranged to check in via satellite phone every 24 hours. Sarah's route would take her through some of the most spectacular and challenging terrain in the Colorado Rockies, crossing multiple peaks above 13,000 feet and traversing areas where even experienced mountaineers required technical climbing skills. But for someone with Sarah's abilities and experience, the route represented a reasonable challenge rather than an extreme risk. She had climbed most of these peaks before, and her physical conditioning and technical skills were well suited to the demands of high-altitude mountaineering. The last confirmed sighting of Sarah came from a group of climbers who encountered her on the afternoon of October 16th as she was establishing camp near Frozen Lake at approximately 11,500 feet. The climbers, members of the Colorado Mountain Club who recognized Sarah from previous encounters, reported that she seemed excited and focused, mentioning that her instruments were detecting unprecedented readings and that she expected the following day to be significant for her research. Dr. Michael Chen, a fellow physicist and mountaineer who was part of the group that last saw Sarah, later recalled that she had shown them some of the data she was collecting on her portable instruments. The electromagnetic readings she was getting were unlike anything I'd seen before, he remembered. The patterns didn't match any known natural phenomena, and Sarah was convinced she was on the verge of a major breakthrough in understanding how quantum mechanics operates in extreme environments. Sarah's planned check-in call on the evening of October 17th never came. When she failed to make contact by noon on October 18th, her research partner and closest friend, Dr. Emily Rodriguez, contacted Rocky Mountain National Park to report her overdue. The search and rescue operation that followed was one of the most extensive in Colorado history, involving multiple agencies and hundreds of volunteers who spent weeks scouring the rugged terrain where Sarah had been conducting her research. The initial search focused on the most likely scenarios for a missing mountaineer: injury from a fall, exposure to rapidly changing weather conditions, or disorientation due to altitude sickness. Helicopters equipped with thermal imaging cameras surveyed the area from above, while ground teams of experienced climbers explored every accessible ravine, valley, and ridgeline. The search was complicated by the extreme terrain and unpredictable October weather, which brought early snowstorms that covered potential clues and made some areas inaccessible. What puzzled search and rescue teams most was the complete absence of any trace of Sarah or her equipment. Experienced mountaineers who disappear in the Rockies typically leave some evidence of their passage: equipment scattered by a fall, footprints in snow or soft earth, or at minimum the disturbed rocks and vegetation that indicate someone has passed through an area. But despite the sophisticated search techniques and the large number of experienced volunteers, no sign of Sarah Mackenzie was ever found. Even more mysterious was the discovery of her campsite at Frozen Lake, which showed no signs of hasty departure or emergency evacuation. Sarah's tent was properly secured, her sleeping bag was neatly arranged, and her non-essential gear was organized exactly as an experienced mountaineer would leave it when departing for a day hike. The only items missing were Sarah herself, her day pack, her scientific instruments, and the satellite phone she carried for emergency communication. Dr. Rodriguez, who had worked closely with Sarah for over 6 years, immediately recognized that something extraordinary had occurred. Sarah was one of the most safety-conscious mountaineers I'd ever known, she told investigators. She never took unnecessary risks, always left detailed plans, and had contingency procedures for every possible emergency. The idea that she would simply disappear without any trace goes against everything I knew about her approach to mountaineering and research. The investigation into Sarah's disappearance attracted attention from multiple organizations beyond the typical search and rescue response. The University of Colorado launched its own inquiry, focusing on Sarah's research and the possibility that her scientific work might provide clues to her fate. The FBI became involved when investigators discovered that Sarah's research had attracted interest from several classified government programs studying electromagnetic anomalies and potential applications for military technology. Dr. James Harrison, Sarah's department head at the University of Colorado, revealed that Sarah's research had been funded partly by a Department of Defense grant studying environmental factors affecting communications and navigation systems in mountainous terrain. While the official purpose of the research was to improve military operations in challenging environments, Harrison acknowledged that Sarah's theoretical work had implications that extended far beyond practical applications. Sarah was working at the absolute cutting edge of our understanding of how quantum mechanics operates in real-world environments, Dr. Harrison explained to investigators. Her theories about temporal anomalies and dimensional boundaries were highly speculative, but her experimental methodology was rigorous. If she had made a breakthrough in her research, it could have had implications for everything from communications technology to our fundamental understanding of the nature of reality. The search for Sarah continued sporadically for months, with family members, friends, and fellow researchers organizing informal expeditions to explore areas that might have been missed in the official search. Dr. Rodriguez made several attempts to retrace Sarah's route using her research notes and GPS data, hoping to understand what her friend had been investigating and possibly find clues that professional search teams had overlooked. Elder Joseph Running Bear also participated in the ongoing search efforts, bringing traditional tracking skills and knowledge of the sacred places that his ancestors had identified throughout the region. His insights proved invaluable in identifying areas where the formal search teams might not have looked, hidden valleys and remote peaks that didn't appear on standard topographic maps, but were known to tribal hunters and spiritual leaders. Sarah was drawn to the places where the world grows thin, Joseph explained to search teams. Our stories tell of people who went to these places and never returned, not because they died, but because they crossed over into the other worlds that exist alongside ours. Sarah understood these stories better than most white people. She knew that her science and our traditions were describing the same phenomena using different languages. As months turned to years, Sarah's disappearance became part of Colorado's outdoor folklore, another reminder of how quickly the mountains could claim even the most experienced and well-prepared adventurers. The Sarah Mackenzie Memorial Fund was established to support search and rescue operations and to continue funding research into the electromagnetic anomalies that had fascinated her. Annual memorial hikes brought together the diverse community of scientists, mountaineers, and indigenous knowledge keepers who had been touched by Sarah's work and her disappearance. Dr. Rodriguez continued Sarah's research, hoping that advancing their understanding of temporal anomalies might provide insights into what had happened to her friend and colleague. Working with a team of graduate students and postdoctoral researchers, she expanded the scope of Sarah's investigations to include additional locations throughout the Colorado Rockies, where unusual phenomena had been reported. Sarah's parents, retired Park Service Ranger Robert Mackenzie and former teacher Margaret Chen Mackenzie, never stopped hoping for answers about their daughter's fate. They maintained Sarah's Boulder apartment exactly as she had left it, preserving her research materials and personal belongings in case she ever returned. They also became advocates for improved safety measures and communication technologies for backcountry researchers and solo hikers. The Mackenzie family's pain was compounded by the complete absence of closure that typically accompanies the death of a loved one. Without a body to bury or definitive evidence of what had happened, they existed in a state of perpetual uncertainty, unable to properly grieve, but also unable to maintain hope without constant emotional strain. Margaret Mackenzie became particularly interested in the spiritual and cultural aspects of her daughter's disappearance, developing relationships with members of the Ute community who shared their perspectives on the mysteries of the high country. Through these connections, she learned about traditional ceremonies and practices designed to honor those who had crossed over to other realms, finding some comfort in the possibility that Sarah's disappearance might represent a spiritual journey rather than a tragic death. The case remained active but cold for nearly a decade, with periodic reviews by law enforcement agencies and occasional renewed search efforts when new information or technology became available. Sarah's story was featured in documentaries about missing persons in national parks, and her research was referenced in academic papers exploring the intersection of quantum physics and consciousness studies. The breakthrough that would finally provide answers came on September 22, 2024, almost exactly 9 years after Sarah's disappearance. A group of climbers attempting a late-season ascent of Long's Peak discovered something extraordinary at approximately 12,000 feet elevation in an area that had been searched multiple times during the original investigation. Partially buried in a snowbank that had persisted through the summer despite global warming trends was an iPhone in a waterproof case, still displaying the distinctive Dr. Sarah Mackenzie identification label that she had affixed to all her electronic equipment. The phone was found by Jake Morrison, a professional mountain guide from Estes Park, who immediately recognized the significance of his discovery and contacted the Park Service. The condition of the phone was remarkable. Despite being exposed to extreme mountain weather for 9 years, the device appeared to be in perfect working order. The waterproof case had protected it from moisture damage, but more mysteriously, the phone's battery still held a substantial charge, showing 73% power remaining. This was impossible according to any known battery technology, as even the most advanced lithium-ion batteries would have been completely drained within months under such conditions. When Park Service investigators accessed the phone's contents, they discovered something even more extraordinary than its impossible preservation. The device contained hundreds of photos, videos, and voice recordings that appeared to have been created during the 9 years since Sarah's disappearance. The timestamps on these files showed a continuous record of activity from October 2015 through September 2024, suggesting that Sarah had somehow continued using the phone throughout the period when she was missing. The photos and videos revealed scenes that defied rational explanation. They showed Sarah in environments that appeared to be versions of the Colorado Rockies, but with significant differences from the familiar landscape. Some images depicted mountain ranges with additional peaks that didn't exist in reality, valleys filled with vegetation that shouldn't grow at high altitude, and weather patterns that violated known meteorological principles. Most remarkably, many of the recordings showed Sarah interacting with other people, individuals who appeared to be missing hikers and mountaineers from various time periods. She could be seen talking and hiking with people wearing climbing gear from different decades, suggesting that she had encountered other individuals who had disappeared in the mountains over the past several decades. Dr. Jennifer Walsh, a digital forensics expert from the Colorado Bureau of Investigation, confirmed that the photos and videos showed no signs of digital manipulation or artificial generation. These appear to be genuine recordings made with this specific device over the timeline indicated by the timestamps, she reported. The metadata is consistent. The image quality matches what we'd expect from this model of iPhone, and there are no indicators of editing or post-production work. Even more puzzling was the audio content found on the phone. Sarah had apparently been recording detailed voice notes throughout her missing years, documenting her experiences and observations with the same scientific rigor she had brought to her original research. These recordings provided a first-person account of what had happened to her after she disappeared from Frozen Lake in October 2015. According to Sarah's audio logs, she had indeed experienced the convergence event she had been investigating, but the results had far exceeded her theoretical predictions. Rather than simply observing temporal anomalies, she had been transported into what she described as a parallel dimensional layer of the Colorado Rockies, a version of the mountains that existed alongside the familiar landscape but operated according to different physical laws. In this parallel dimension, Sarah explained, time moved differently, and individuals who disappeared in the mountains under specific circumstances could find themselves displaced from their original timeline. She had discovered a community of other displaced persons, hikers, climbers, and indigenous people from various historical periods who had experienced similar dimensional transitions and now existed in this alternate version of the Rocky Mountains. Sarah's recordings describe this parallel dimension as both similar to and dramatically different from the familiar Colorado Rockies. The geography was recognizable, but enhanced, with additional mountain ranges and valleys that provided access to regions that didn't exist in normal reality. The climate was more stable, with less extreme weather variations, and the ecosystem included plant and animal species that had been extinct in the regular world for centuries, or had never evolved there at all. Most significantly, the parallel dimension appeared to be home to an advanced civilization that Sarah initially described as the Mountain Guardians, beings who had evolved from early human populations that had adapted to high-altitude life over thousands of years. These mountain guardians had developed technologies based on their deep understanding of the electromagnetic properties that created the dimensional boundaries, and they served as protectors and guides for displaced individuals from other timelines. The mountain guardians, according to Sarah's descriptions, possessed knowledge of quantum mechanics and dimensional physics that far exceeded current human understanding. They had learned to manipulate the electromagnetic fields that governed the boundaries between dimensions, allowing them to create stable living environments and to occasionally facilitate communication or transportation between different dimensional layers. Sarah's role in this parallel community had evolved over the 9 years of her displacement. Initially a confused and displaced refugee, she had gradually become a valued researcher and cultural bridge, using her scientific training to help the Mountain Guardians understand the technology and culture of 21st century Earth while learning about their advanced approach to dimensional physics. The audio recordings revealed that Sarah had been working on a project to establish more stable communication channels between the parallel dimension and normal reality. Her research had focused on identifying the specific conditions and locations where the dimensional boundaries were most permeable, with the goal of allowing displaced individuals to send messages to their families and possibly even facilitating limited travel between the dimensions. The iPhone's discovery represented the first successful result of this communication project. Sarah had spent months calculating the precise electromagnetic conditions and geographic coordinates that would allow the phone to transition from the parallel dimension back to normal reality. The device had been programmed with a GPS tracker that would guide it to a location where it could be discovered by climbers from the regular world. Among the most poignant contents of the phone were video messages that Sarah had recorded specifically for her family and friends. In these recordings, she appeared healthy and happy, though noticeably older than when she had disappeared. Her hair was longer and grayed at the temples, and her face showed the weathering that came from years of high-altitude living, but she radiated the same enthusiasm and intellectual curiosity that had always characterized her personality. In her message to her parents, Sarah explained that while she missed them terribly and thought about them every day, she had found a sense of purpose and fulfillment in her new life that made return both difficult and potentially dangerous. She had become an essential part of the research team working to understand and stabilize the dimensional boundaries, and her departure could potentially disrupt critical work that affected the safety of all displaced individuals. Sarah also revealed that she was not alone among recent arrivals to the parallel dimension. She had encountered several other missing persons from Colorado and neighboring states, including some whose disappearances had been attributed to hiking accidents or exposure, but who had actually experienced dimensional displacement. These individuals had formed a close-knit community, supporting each other as they adapted to their new reality, while working together on projects to maintain connection with their original world. Dr. Rodriguez was both devastated and relieved to finally learn what had happened to her friend and colleague. Knowing that Sarah is alive and continuing her research provides some comfort, she said, but realizing that she's essentially living in another dimension and can't come home creates a new kind of grief. It's like losing someone to a foreign country that you can never visit. The discovery of Sarah's phone and the evidence it contained attracted intense interest from the scientific community, government agencies, and media organizations around the world. The implications of documented dimensional displacement were staggering, suggesting that missing person cases in remote areas might need to be reconsidered in light of phenomena that had previously been relegated to science fiction. Dr. Harrison organized a multidisciplinary research team to study the evidence from Sarah's phone and to attempt to replicate or understand the conditions that had led to her dimensional displacement. The team included physicists, computer scientists, anthropologists, and specialists in indigenous knowledge systems, all working together to develop a comprehensive understanding of the dimensional phenomena that Sarah had documented. The University of Colorado established the Mackenzie Institute for Dimensional Studies, dedicated to researching the intersection of quantum physics and consciousness studies that had been Sarah's specialty. The Institute's mission was to advance scientific understanding of dimensional boundaries while working to develop technologies that might eventually allow for controlled communication or travel between parallel realities. Elder Joseph Running Bear became a key collaborator in this research, sharing traditional knowledge about the sacred places where his ancestors had reported similar phenomena. His insights proved invaluable in identifying additional locations where dimensional anomalies might be occurring, and in developing culturally appropriate approaches to studying these phenomena. Sarah's journey confirms what our elders have always taught us, Joseph explained to the research team. The mountains are gateways to other worlds, and some people are called to cross those gateways. Now we have scientific proof of what our people have known for generations. This knowledge brings responsibility. We must use it wisely and with respect for the sacred nature of these places. The research team began developing protocols for investigating other potential dimensional displacement sites throughout the Colorado Rockies and beyond. Using Sarah's research notes and the data from her phone, they identified several locations where similar electromagnetic anomalies might indicate the presence of dimensional boundaries. These investigations led to the discovery of additional evidence for dimensional displacement phenomena. At several sites, researchers found personal belongings from missing hikers that showed signs of having been exposed to environmental conditions that didn't match the known climate history of the area. Some items appeared to have aged much more slowly than should have been possible, while others showed wear patterns that suggested exposure to climates that didn't exist in the regular Colorado mountains. Most significantly, the research team detected electromagnetic signatures at these sites that matched the patterns Sarah had documented in her original research. Using specialized equipment based on her theoretical work, they were able to measure fluctuations in local space-time that correlated with the conditions she had predicted would be necessary for dimensional boundary formation. The Mackenzie Institute's research attracted funding and collaboration from unexpected sources. Government agencies with interests in advanced physics and potential military applications provided resources for the investigation, while private foundations focused on consciousness studies and anomalous phenomena offered additional support. The interdisciplinary nature of the work brought together researchers who might never have collaborated under normal circumstances. Dr. Rodriguez led efforts to establish more stable communication with the parallel dimension where Sarah was living. Using the electromagnetic signature data from Sarah's phone and her documented research into dimensional boundary manipulation, the team began developing equipment that might allow for regular message exchange between the dimensions. These efforts yielded promising results when the team detected what appeared to be deliberate electromagnetic signals from the parallel dimension, transmitted on frequencies that matched Sarah's research specifications. The signals were brief and difficult to decode, but they contained mathematical patterns that suggested intelligent origin and intentional communication. The first successful two-way communication between the dimensions occurred on December 15, 2024, when the research team managed to transmit a simple mathematical sequence to the parallel dimension and received a complex response that demonstrated understanding of the original message. The response included additional mathematical information that appeared to be instructions for improving the communication protocol. Over the following weeks, the communication system was refined until the team could exchange basic text messages with Sarah and her colleagues in the parallel dimension. These conversations provided additional details about the nature of dimensional displacement and the community of displaced individuals who had found new lives in the alternate version of the Colorado Rockies. Sarah's messages revealed that the parallel dimension community had been working on their own projects to establish communication with the regular world, motivated partly by their desire to reassure families about the fate of missing loved ones. The successful communication breakthrough represented the culmination of years of collaborative research between displaced scientists and the mountain guardians who had provided them with advanced theoretical frameworks. The parallel dimension community also provided warnings about the potential dangers of uncontrolled dimensional displacement. According to their research, the electromagnetic conditions that created dimensional boundaries could be extremely dangerous for unprepared individuals, potentially resulting in death or displacement to unstable dimensional layers where survival would be impossible. Sarah and her colleagues had developed safety protocols for their own research, but they emphasized that attempts to deliberately trigger dimensional displacement without proper preparation and support systems could have catastrophic consequences. They shared detailed information about the specific conditions that made dimensional transition safe and the types of preparation that were necessary for survival in alternate dimensional layers. Most importantly, the parallel dimension community revealed that they were working on technologies that might eventually allow for controlled travel between dimensions, potentially enabling displaced individuals to visit their original families or even permanently return home. However, this research was still in early stages and would require years of additional development before becoming practical. The communication with Sarah's parallel dimension community also provided insights into the broader implications of dimensional displacement phenomena. According to their research, similar dimensional boundaries existed in mountain ranges and other geographic locations around the world, suggesting that missing person cases in remote areas might be more complex than previously understood. Sarah's team had encountered displaced individuals from various countries and time periods, indicating that dimensional displacement was a global phenomenon that had been occurring throughout human history. Many traditional stories about people who disappeared in sacred places or natural areas might actually be cultural memories of dimensional displacement events. The Mackenzie Institute began collaborating with researchers and indigenous knowledge keepers from other countries to investigate potential dimensional displacement sites worldwide. This international collaboration revealed patterns of missing person cases and traditional stories that suggested dimensional phenomena might be occurring in mountain ranges, deep forests, and other remote areas on every continent. Dr. Elena Vasquez, a cultural anthropologist from the University of New Mexico, joined the research team to study the traditional knowledge systems that might provide insights into dimensional displacement phenomena. Her work revealed that many indigenous cultures around the world had sophisticated understanding of what they described as spirit worlds, or parallel realities, that closely matched the scientific descriptions of dimensional boundaries. What we're seeing in Sarah's case isn't unique or unprecedented, Dr. Vasquez explained. Indigenous cultures worldwide have maintained knowledge about these phenomena for thousands of years. The scientific documentation Sarah has provided gives us new tools for understanding traditional knowledge that has often been dismissed as mythology or superstition. The collaboration between scientific research and traditional knowledge systems became a hallmark of the Mackenzie Institute's approach to dimensional studies. Rather than treating indigenous perspectives as folklore to be debunked, the research team recognized that traditional knowledge keepers possessed sophisticated understanding of phenomena that Western science was only beginning to comprehend. Elder Joseph Running Bear worked closely with Dr. Vasquez to develop culturally appropriate protocols for investigating sacred sites where dimensional phenomena might be occurring. These protocols emphasized respect for indigenous sovereignty and traditional spiritual practices, while enabling scientific research that could advance understanding of dimensional boundaries. The success of the communication project with Sarah's parallel dimension community led to expanded efforts to locate and communicate with other displaced individuals. The Mackenzie Institute developed a global network of monitoring stations designed to detect electromagnetic signatures that might indicate dimensional displacement events or ongoing communication attempts from parallel realities. These monitoring efforts yielded surprising results when the team detected signals from multiple sources that appeared to originate from various parallel dimensional layers. The signals suggested that dimensional displacement was far more common than anyone had realized, and that numerous communities of displaced individuals existed in alternate versions of Earth's geographic features. Some of these communities appeared to have developed their own technologies for interdimensional communication, suggesting that the parallel dimension where Sarah lived was not unique in its advanced understanding of dimensional physics. The discovery of multiple parallel communities raised the possibility that a broader network of displaced individuals and alternate civilizations might exist alongside the familiar world. Dr. Rodriguez led efforts to establish communication with these additional parallel communities, hoping to learn more about the scope and nature of dimensional displacement phenomena. These communications revealed that some parallel dimensions contained not just displaced individuals from the regular world, but entire civilizations that had developed along different evolutionary and technological paths. One particularly advanced parallel community claimed to have mastered controlled dimensional travel and offered to share their technologies with the regular world. However, they also warned about the potential consequences of widespread dimensional travel, including the risk of destabilizing the electromagnetic fields that maintained the boundaries between realities. The ethical implications of dimensional displacement research became a major focus for the Mackenzie Institute as the scope and complexity of the phenomena became apparent. The team developed guidelines for responsible research that emphasize safety, respect for displaced communities, and careful consideration of the potential consequences of their discoveries. Sarah's parents found both comfort and new challenges in the ongoing communication with their daughter. While they were relieved to know that she was alive and thriving, the knowledge that she was living in a parallel dimension that they could never visit created a unique form of grief and longing. Regular communication allowed them to maintain a relationship with Sarah, but it also emphasized the permanence of their separation. Margaret Mackenzie became an advocate for families dealing with unexplained disappearances, working to educate others about the possibility that missing loved ones might have experienced dimensional displacement rather than death. She established support groups for families whose missing persons cases remained unsolved and helped connect them with the resources and research being conducted by the Mackenzie Institute. Robert Mackenzie used his experience as a Park Service ranger to develop new safety protocols for backcountry recreation in areas where dimensional anomalies had been detected. Working with park authorities throughout the Rocky Mountain region, he helped establish warning systems and emergency procedures designed to protect hikers and climbers from inadvertent dimensional displacement. The discovery of Sarah's phone and the subsequent research into dimensional displacement phenomena transformed understanding of missing person cases in remote areas throughout the United States and beyond. Law enforcement agencies began incorporating dimensional displacement theory into their investigation protocols, and search and rescue organizations developed new approaches to cases where traditional methods had failed to locate missing individuals. The Colorado Rockies became a focal point for international research into dimensional phenomena, attracting scientists, spiritual seekers, and curious individuals from around the world. The state government established special protections for areas where dimensional anomalies had been detected, while also supporting research that might eventually lead to technologies with beneficial applications. Tourism related to dimensional phenomena brought both opportunities and challenges to Colorado's mountain communities. While increased visitor interest provided economic benefits, it also raised concerns about safety and environmental protection in sensitive areas where dimensional boundaries might be located. The Mackenzie Institute worked with local communities to develop responsible approaches to dimensional tourism that emphasized education, safety, and respect for both the natural environment and the indigenous cultural traditions associated with these sacred places. They established visitor centers and educational programs designed to inform the public about dimensional displacement research while discouraging dangerous attempts to trigger displacement events. Dr. Sarah Mackenzie's story became a powerful reminder that the boundaries of human knowledge and experience were far more expansive than most people realized. Her journey from missing person to interdimensional researcher demonstrated that curiosity and scientific rigor could lead to discoveries that challenged fundamental assumptions about the nature of reality. 9 years after her disappearance in the Colorado Rockies, Sarah had become a bridge between worlds, facilitating understanding and communication between the familiar Earth and the parallel dimensions that existed alongside it. Her phone, found buried in snow at 12,000 feet, had opened doorways to new realms of scientific knowledge and spiritual understanding that would continue to transform human consciousness for generations to come. The hiker who had vanished in the mountains had indeed found what she was seeking, not just scientific validation of her theories about dimensional boundaries, but a new home and purpose in a reality where the impossible became everyday experience. Her legacy continued to unfold in both dimensions, inspiring researchers and adventurers to push beyond the conventional limits of exploration and discovery. The Colorado Rockies remained as beautiful and challenging as ever, but for those who knew the secret of dimensional displacement, they represented something far more extraordinary than scenic wilderness. They were gateways to infinite possibilities, portals to parallel worlds where human consciousness could explore the deepest mysteries of existence, and where the spirit of adventure could lead to discoveries that exceeded the wildest dreams of science fiction. Sarah's story reminded everyone who heard it that the greatest expeditions might not lead to distant geographic destinations, but to alternate realities that existed just beyond the veil of ordinary perception. In learning to navigate between dimensions, she had become the ultimate explorer, mapping territories that most people could never imagine, and establishing communication routes between worlds that most travelers would never visit. The mountains had called to her with voices that transcended ordinary sound, and she had answered that call with the courage and curiosity that defined the best of Colorado's outdoor tradition. Her journey proved that some paths led not just to new places, but to entirely new ways of being, where the boundaries between science and spirit, between individual consciousness and universal mystery, dissolved like snow, melting under the eternal sun, that shone equally on all dimensions and all possibilities for human discovery and growth.